Can a Ferrari team leader publicly admit that they will no longer fight for the title without losing their job? What Fred Vasseur has just declared could be the beginning of the end for leadership in Maranello, and you need to know all the details because this is a real madness. Ferrari reached the 2025 season with high expectations. The team had not only managed to close the previous year as a runner-up of the world, but did with the impulse of a redemption narrative. Under the command of Fred Vasseur, historical errors had been reduced in boxes, and the team seemed finally focused on results. But Lewis Hamilton's star incorporation was the turning point that transformed ambition into absolute pressure. The 7-time world champion, which left Mercedes to pursue a last title with the rampant Cavallino, found in Ferrari a disorganized environment, an unstable car and a technical culture that seems not to have learned from its past mistakes. The magnitude of the crisis is amplified when the global performance of the team is analyzed. After 12 great awards, Ferrari not only has not won a single race, but is 238 points behind McLaren in the Construction Championship. Hamilton, who arrived as Salvador, has completed the worst start of the season of his career. Not a single podium in the main race, which shows that neither his experience nor his talent have been enough to compensate for the weaknesses of the SF25. And this is not just a statistical anecdote, it is a devastating message for the team. When a pilot such as Hamilton fails to stand out or in mixed conditions, it means that there are structural failures in the car design philosophy. To all this is added the fact that Charles Leclerc has not managed to take advantage of the car. In theory, he must be the pilot best adapted to the car for his internal knowledge of the team, but the problems are so serious that he has even opted for drastic adjustments in his driving style. In several sessions he has had to modify his braking technique and curve entry to compensate for the lack of aerodynamic support, which has affected his trust and consistency in classification. The most alarming thing is that not even on weekends where SF25 seems to be closer to the head rhythm, Ferrari manages to capitalize on strategy or career management. Internally, morality is in historical minimums. The atmosphere in Maranello is tense, with divisions between the departments of development, aerodynamics, and simulation. Some key engineers have begun to question the Directorate of Project 2025, especially seeing that other teams such as McLaren have achieved much more successful technical transitions without sacrificing stability or performance. Meanwhile, Vasseur faces the pressure not only of the results, but also to keep a team that seems increasingly fragmented. This is the perfect storm that has placed Ferrari in a descending spiral. And the most worrying thing is that it is not a bad weekend or a bad update. We are facing a repetitive pattern that covers the strategy, technical design, decision-making, and above all, the runway execution. Ferrari is not in crisis because he lacks luck. It is in crisis because it has systematically failed in each of the pillars that define a champion team. This is not just the context of a difficult season, it is the portrait of a structural collapse in the most iconic team in Formula One. It all started with an interview after the Grand Prix of Great Britain. Instead of reaffirming the commitment to the comeback or launching a challenge message towards McLaren or Mercedes, Vasseur adopted an unexpectedly defeatist tone. He said that it will be more than difficult to reach McLaren, and added that not even winning all the remaining races could ensure that Ferrari ends as a champion. This phrase was interpreted as an explicit recognition that the 2025 season is already lost, and generated a media and political earthquake. It was not just the admission of a mathematical defeat, it was the collapse of a narrative. The narrative that Ferrari, with Hamilton behind the wheel and a renewed technical structure, was ready to return to the top. But the truly disturbing moment came when Benedetto Vigna, the Ferrari CEO, was directly consulted on Vasseur's continuity. His answer was anything but reassuring. "It's Julio and we are discussing," he said, with an ambiguity that in Maranello's political ecosystem is equivalent to a veiled threat. Vigna is known for his pragmatism and not issuing unnecessary public judgments. If in the midst of a sports crisis he does not clearly support his team leader, it is because the ground under Vasseur's feet is no longer firm. And there is even more. In the midst of this crisis, Vasseur made another statement that unleashed even more controversy. He announced that Ferrari is already focusing part of his resources towards the development of the 2026 car. He literally said that, "In Ferrari we know what we have to do," referring to the balance between continuing to develop the SF25 and start working in the car for the new technical regulations. This strategy, although it may seem logical from the technical point of view, has been interpreted by many as a sign of abandonment of the present. In other words, Ferrari would be tacitly renouncing the current season so as not to compromise the car of the future. That decision has generated internal tensions. Some members of the technical team disagree, arguing that it is a strategic mistake to yield so early in the season, especially when there are still key races such as Monza, Singapore, and Mexico, where podium opportunities are still real. In addition, concentrating in 2026 could imply a loss of motivation and competitiveness in the remainder of the year, which would have a direct impact on the development of pilots, sponsors, and morals of the team. Vasseur's statements, in essence, have turned on all alarms. They have gone from being technical analysis to become symbolic messages, white flags that many inside and outside the team consider inadmissible. What was a performance crisis now is also a leadership crisis. And in Formula One, when a team loses faith in its boss, the decline is usually as fast as irreversible. Vasseur has not only questioned Ferrari's immediate future, he has placed his own continuity in check. And the most disturbing thing is that, until now, he has not offered a single gesture that shows that he is willing to change course. Fred Vasseur has reached a crossroads that few team directors have faced with such visibility and pressure. Ferrari's prestige amplifies each decision, each error, and every word. But at this stage of the 2025 season, what is at stake is no longer only its leadership, but the institutional cohesion of the entire team. What began as an ambitious commitment to consolidate Ferrari's renaissance after a very promising 2024 season, today has become a counter-relage race to save the credibility of a project that threatens to collapse from within. The figure of Vasseur, which initially represented the calm and rationality in contrast to Ferrari's historical emotional fluctuations, now begins to generate doubts even within the Maranello walls. His management style, based on delegation and technical trust, has been questioned by his apparent passivity in the face of a prolonged crisis. In internal meetings there is talk of lack of tactical reaction, repeated errors in the stop windows, and of a progressive disconnection with the urgent needs of the pilots. Leclerc, at several times, has shown signs of frustration. Hamilton, although diplomat, has suggested that the team has failed to adapt to its style with the necessary rapidity. And that lack of adaptation is not a minor problem. In Formula One, when invested in a champion like Hamilton, the team is expected to react agility, which understands and executes the specific demands of a pilot that has won more races than most current teams. But perhaps the most critical factor to define the future of Vasseur is in external perception. Ferrari does not compete only on the track, it also competes in the sponsors market, in the media, and in the global narrative of Formula One. And today, that narrative is revolving dangerously against it. The lack of results is being accompanied by a loss of authority. Paddock analysts such as Martin Brundle and Ted Kravitz have begun to suggest that Ferrari looks like a team without clear direction, and that the difference between planning and execution had never been so marked in the modern era of the team. This is not simply media noise. It is the reflection of a global perception that could push the management team to make drastic decisions to recover control of the narrative. Vasseur could become the scapegoat of a deeper crisis, not because everything is his fault, but because Ferrari needs a visible and forceful response. Historically, the team has acted in times of turbulence. When there are no results, a sacrifice is sought that serves as a political message. The names of possible substitutes already circulate in the halls of the F1. Some insiders mention Antonello Coletta, head of Ferrari Competizione GT, as a profile that could return the Italian identity to the project. Others point to figures with experience in winning structures, such as Andreas Seidel, or even the return of Mattia Binotto in a technical role, if not political. Although it sounds unlikely, Ferrari has given more drastic turns in the past. The truth is that Vasseur's continuity will depend not on a long-term plan, but on immediate results. The maneuvering margin has been reduced to the essential: O wins or leaves. And this leads us to a broader reflection. Can such an iconic team allow you to continue stumbling with the same stones? Or is it time to accept that the problem is not only the director, but the structure and philosophy itself with which Ferrari competes in this era of millimeter precision and operational stability? Time is exhausted, and with each race that passes without victories, the figure of Vasseur is diluted, as if it were already part of the past of a project that promised glory, but that, until now, has only delivered frustration. Ferrari is once again in front of the mirror of his own story, and the image he returns is not encouraging. The Scuderia has opted strong. He signed the most laureate pilot of his generation, redesigned his car from scratch, and deposited his immediate future in the hands of Fred Vasseur, a leader who promised rationality, modernization, and a break with the cyclical crises that have defined Maranello during the last decades. But in the middle of the season, that promise has been questioned. The project that should lead to the team back to the top is being devoured by a combination of wrong strategic decisions, design failures, a lack of authority in the direction, and, perhaps the most worrying, an internal language that transmits resignation before ambition. Therefore, now I ask you, would you bet on Vasseur's continuity as a symbol of stability and long-term process? Or would you consider that you have already failed in your main task and it is time to look for a new leader who restarts the way? What do you think Ferrari really needs to get out of this spiral?